what I'm going to teach you, which I may not have brought up to you yet, is called leptin. You probably may have heard the term leptin, but what that is, that works with the ghrelin. So ghrelin makes you feel like you're hungry, but leptin lets you know when you're full. Now, y'all know when you eat, you eventually get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm full. Well, we've been taught to like clear your plate. Like that's what your family wants to do when you're a kid, because kids are picky eaters and they don't always want to eat. And sometimes, you get a plate of food in front of you and you feel it's necessary to clear your plate. And so, you're even as an adult, you're like, oh, I'm really full, but I'm going to keep eating because I don't want to waste my food. Nobody wants to waste food. There's starving kids, right? So that's what you tell yourself, or that's what your parents have told you. It's what you've been taught. So the leptin actually knows when you're full, and sometimes you can overeat, and there's a reason for that. When your leptin is at its optimal levels, which at this point, if you haven't done what I'm about to get to, your leptin levels are probably not where they are supposed to be. And that is 100% common for most people in the world. So what it does is you're full, and then you don't have to go sit down on the couch and relax and let it digest. When your leptin is working perfectly, you eat until you're full, just full, not until you're like feeling full, until you're like, I've had enough food. And then what you do, you put your fork down and you get up and you move. So that's how your body is supposed to work. And you go back into like the old days or whatever, the cavemen, they would eat and they would eat their berries and they would eat their meat or whatever, and they would get up and they'd go do what they've got to do. So now in 2004, a study was done proving that food, and specifically sugar and white flour, can actually block the leptin hormone levels, and it downregulates that hormone to the brain. And what that means is that when you eat, insulin is, you eat and then your insulin levels go up. And then when that insulin levels are too high, it's blocking the leptin to your brain. So if you're looking for a way to lose weight and you can't lose weight, what they're saying is you have to lose the sugar, the white flour processed food, like sweets, sugar, cookie, cakes, processed bread, the common, right? And that holds true for most people. And so what it does is when your insulin levels are too high and your leptin is being blocked, now all of a sudden you have cravings. And here's why. Leptin levels are blocked, and it allows more addictive pathways to the brain. I think that we all know that, right? I think we all kind of know that your cravings kind of like, I've been through so many courses on dissecting cravings, whether you're lonely or sad or upset or angry. There's all these like patterns that you've put yourself into, and you're like, why do I crave ice cream at night? Or why do I crave bread? Or why do I crave these things? And you might look for the reasons to dissect the reason why, but psychologically, you might not know that it's actually caused by leptin levels being downgraded. In this lecture that I'm kind of relaying all this information from, if you want to Google her, and I can put it in the notes, her name is Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson, and she has like this whole entire series on the psychology of leptin and ghrelin and the hunger hormone and all of these cravings. And when she was talking about this, about cravings and how the leptin is blocked to the brain and how these addictions come in, and you've heard me say, and you've heard a lot of people say, sugar is just as addicting as cocaine, right? And technically, in the pathways to your brain, it's true, and it has been proven true. So if you think about it, do you guys know where cocaine actually comes from? It's a cocoa leaf. So what happens in the process of cocaine coming from the cocoa leaf is that you take the leaf. If you were actually to chew like a cocoa leaf, you would never get high on cocaine. It doesn't work that way. So what they do is they take the inner essence of the leaf and they purify it and refine it down to a fine white powder. That becomes cocaine. And what about the poppy plant, right? It's the same thing. Heroin comes from the poppy plant. So if you take the inner essence of the poppy and refine it down and process it down, it becomes a fine brown powder. That becomes heroin. When you take sugar, you can take, there's beet, corn, corn, turn it into corn syrup, sugar cane. What you're doing is you're taking the inner essence of the sugar leaf and you're processing it and refining it down into a fine white powder. It becomes sugar. Same thing with flour. Take grains, whether it's like wheat, oats, barley, rice. There's just a few I can think off the top of my head. And you take the inner essence of that and you refine it down to a fine white powder. It becomes flour. So do you see, we've taken like all these whole foods and we've turned them literally into drugs. Now I know that sugar is not cocaine and I know that flour is also not heroin. It's just what it actually does to you, what it does to your brain and what the reaction is. Like alcohol is different than, taking drugs and marijuana, blah, 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 blah. So you become addicted to it in the same way where it's downgrading your leptin, but it affects you differently. That's what I'm going to say. Cocaine is not sugar, but it does become as addicted. How long would it take for you to heal from having this addiction to sugar and flour? Well, you have to figure in the pathways that the length that it takes to actually become addicted is pretty short amount of time. You could eat sugar every single day for like 3 days and become addicted to sugar. That's how fast it can happen. But to rewind that process and not have that, and to get your leptin and your ghrelin and in your insulin levels all to be balanced out, they're saying scientifically it takes 21 days just to break the habit, just to stop thinking about it. You know what I mean? Just to stop saying like, oh, I need bread, I need sugar, I need this, I need that. But it takes 8 weeks for your levels to be completely where they need to be. So that would be coming off of sugar and coming off of white processed flour. That includes, anything that's processed out of a bag, like cookies and cakes and so forth. So let me try to recap it in a way that you guys can maybe put it together and understand it. Processed food, sugar and white flour, it's consumed. What it does is it blocks the leptin hormone. Your insulin levels spike. It releases a massive amount of dopamine, which is that feel-good hormone, which opens the addictive pathways to the brain. So the more you're consuming it, the more it's your leptin is kind of like diminished, and then all of a sudden, like you're like, I need that. It's like the mouth feel, you know what I mean? Like you get that, you're like, for some reason I like the way it tastes. I like the way that it smells. There's something that's happening that I really enjoy. And so it's like getting back to that pleasure place. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it tastes good, right? So you want more, you want more, you want more.